Hello and welcome to Small Business Pivots. I'm your host, Michael Morrison, a small business coach who helps guide small businesses from struggle to success. On our podcast, we explore the stories, strategies, and pivots that small business owners have made to build successful businesses doing $1 million and more in annual revenue. Our guest today is Mike Beckham. Mike is co-founder and chief executive officer of Simple Modern, a leading producer of premium drinkware and lifestyle products. Founded in 2015 and based in Oklahoma, Simple Modern currently generates a 9-figure annual revenue and is committed to generosity, donating at least 10% of annual profits to nonprofit organizations. Under Mike's leadership, the company has grown into a category leader for Amazon, Target, Walmart, and Sam's Club. Prior to Simple Modern, Mike spent over a decade working in the nonprofit sector and subsequently helped found and operate several successful e-commerce businesses. Let's get to Mike now and learn the pivots they made to scale a small business from startup to 9 figures and still counting. Welcome to another Small Business Pivots podcast. Today we have a very special guest who's not too far down the road from myself. We're in Oklahoma City, and sir, you are in Moore, Oklahoma. Is that correct?
That is correct. I grew up in Oklahoma City and have lived in Norman since I was a student at the University of Oklahoma, and so now we headquarter out of Moore.
Your company, Simple Modern. You are the co-founder, CEO, Mike Beckham. Tell us a little bit about where your business and life is today.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are about a 100-person business. We sell primarily drinkware, insulated stainless steel drinkware, but we also sell a variety of complementary products for both adults and children. And we've grown right here in the state of Oklahoma since founding in 2015. Started the company with a couple $100,000 of my money and a few co-founders. And since then, obviously, it's been a pretty crazy ride to grow to this level. The thing that I tell people about the company is that we started with an idea of what would it look like to build a company based on the idea of generosity, a for-profit company that's actually obsessed with generosity, which seems a little bit like an oxymoron. What would happen if you did that? If you said, hey, can we build something where the employees, the community, the partners, the customers, the community that it's planted in, where everyone's life was in some way improved, enriched by the existence of a for-profit company? And so Simple Modern is basically an experiment in that direction of what happens when you put that front and center as your focus. And at least so far, 8 years in, the answer has been that you can create something pretty special.
Wow. So for those that are just listening and not watching, behind you are lots of photographs of family. So a lot of us were raised in a family. What was your childhood like? A lot of small business owners have to overcome trials, tribulations of some kind. Some of them don't get past it. It's a blockage in their mindset. What was your childhood like?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I grew up in the state of Oklahoma and was born to two parents who worked in the mental health profession. Mm-hmm. The way that I think that impacted my life growing up, Michael, is that I'm a very achievement-oriented personality, and a really critical thing happened for me where achievement within my family was defined as helping other people. And I'm really thankful for that gift for my parents. I'm curious what I would be like if I had maybe grown up in an environment where achievement was defined differently for me. But fortunately, I had two parents that from the time that I was very young communicated, we did not pick the jobs where we could make the most money. We picked jobs where we felt like we could make the most impact in the lives of other people. So that became a defining thought and principle that I took on and has really guided, I think, most of my adult life and career. The decisions I've made is I want to make a positive, redemptive impact in the lives of other people. So I've been out of college for about 20 years. And if you divided that into two 10-year buckets, I spent about 10 of that focused almost exclusively on the nonprofit world and about 10 of that focused on the for-profit world. But the focus has been the same in both halves. how do I make a positive impact in the lives of other people? I'm not a believer that you can't do that simply because you're in the for-profit world. In fact, I think what I've come to is the conclusion that actually my ability to make a positive impact has been higher running a for-profit company than it was when I was in the nonprofit world.
So being impactful is very meaningful to you and your family. So before Simple Modern, before you founded that, what did you do after college?
Yeah, absolutely. So in college, had a pretty life-defining moment. I became a Christian. I'd grown up in Oklahoma, which is kind of in the Bible Belt, and had gone to church, but faith had not been an important part of my life. And I was in college for 5 years. About halfway in is when faith became a really critical and foundational part of who I was. And it really reshaped the way that I thought about how I wanted to use my career. I was a finance major. And at first, my vision was I want to go into the business world and potentially be more philanthropic minded. Surprisingly, an opportunity arose. And even more surprisingly, I took it for me to work in the ministry world, in the nonprofit world, right after college. And I said yes, basically, to a 1-year opportunity because my wife was going to be finishing a master's degree. Surprisingly, I loved it. And 1 year turned into 2, turned into 10. And so as a result, I spent a lot of time using my giftings to try and actually pour into the lives of other people. And I think I found, again, I'm an achievement-oriented person, but I think I found that a lot of the meaning and richness that I found in life was through personal relationships and connection with other people. You mentioned the wall behind me. That's part of the reason why I have it, is that anyone who gets on a Zoom call with me or a podcast or walks in my office, I want it to be really clear that, hey, people are what matter to me.
Yeah.
And that people are more important than accomplishing goals and getting to a certain number. So all of those things were a pretty big part of my 20s, and frankly, probably would have surprised a lot of people that knew me in high school or early college. I've always been very driven, and I don't think it would surprise people that someday I went on to start a business. But I think the several years that I spent focused in full-time ministry where, my wife and I didn't really make any money. We had to raise the money that we got for our salaries, but where we were amazingly content and happy and felt an incredible sense of purpose, that those lives ended up being foundational for the way that I've viewed my business career, which came later.
Very cool. Faith is powerful. I know
Absolutely.
Quite a few guests that we've had on the show, one of their pivots in life was turning to a Christian, converting to a Christian. So so you started Simple Modern. Did you have any businesses before that?
So in 2009, I was leading in the ministry world, and my younger brother approached me with an idea that he wanted to start a business around. I was intrigued because there was a heavy economics side of the business. It was an auction model for e-commerce. And I really did not get to use any of the financial skills that I had within the ministry world outside of, helping do some financial planning for people. So I was intrigued and told him I'd be interested in helping him, on a nights and weekends kind of basis and a get it off the ground kind of manner. So helped him recruit some other executives, and that business launched in October of 2009. I never would have expected how successful or how meteoric the rise would be for that company. In about 13 months, it went from founding to it had its first $1 million revenue day. And that was shocking to everyone, I think. And it really turned into all of a sudden this thing that I thought would be like, hey, I might, dink around on this a few hours a week, to where this was taking up, really significant amounts of my week. I was really working the equivalent of 2 full-time jobs. And then my wife and I got pregnant with our first kid. And I just realized I'm not going to be able to do all the things I'm doing at a level of excellence that I would like to be. And that led me to start wondering, hey, should I consider going full-time in the business world? And then that happened in 2013 or 2012, somewhere in there. Wow.
Yeah, it's family, faith, freedom. Those things can really change your world if you know the priorities to put them in. And so that's a great accomplishment right there. I love your story of Simple Modern. So how did that evolve? How did that come to fruition to start a company like that?
Well, after I had spent a few years full-time in the business world, I think that I found there were a lot of things I really enjoyed about it. As I mentioned, there are definitely parts of my skill set, the way that my brain's wired, that really lend itself towards numbers and things like e-commerce. They just came really naturally, and I enjoyed them. I felt like I was good at them. But I also felt some of the holes that, for me to be motivated and to give my best work, but also to feel the most meaningful, like I really needed to be able to draw a connective line between how I spent my day and how did this actually positively impact the lives of other people. And I started thinking a lot more about culture and about mission. And I came to the conclusion that I either wanted to go back into the nonprofit world in some capacity, or that I really wanted to help start a company that was, from day one, was built on a very unique and distinctive culture and thought process. And in the last few years, there's a TED Talk that's gone very viral. I think it's the third most watched TED Talk of all time, by Simon Sinek, where he talks about that great brands start with why, and that's actually how they sell. They don't tell you what they sell; they tell you why they do it. And I thought, how much better is it to even go a step earlier, and to, before you figure out what you're going to sell or how you're going to tell people about your why, that you actually start with the why it exists, and that everything organically and naturally flows out of that. So that's what we did. We started a company. All we knew was we wanted it to be built around generosity. That culture was going to be very important to us. And we had some really, both of the co-founders I started the company with had worked with me at the previous company with my brother, and I'd worked with them for several years. We had a really specific idea of the type of culture that we wanted to create. And we knew we wanted to do something in e-commerce because that's where we had deep skill sets. And that was about it, Michael. We knew that we wanted to do those things. So people will ask me all the time, like, how'd you come up with the name? And it's like, honestly, it's a very pedestrian story. Or how did you know, what was the moment you knew water bottles? And the answer is that, it was an iterative process, and it wasn't even the first product that we tried.
Really?
The parts that were foundational and the parts that I think make Simple Modern special and who we are, we actually did know those at the beginning. So in a lot of ways, the company that I run today is defined a lot more about who we are and why we exist than it is what we sell or what products that we have. That we really have a very tangible understanding of mission and what we want to be about and what we want to feel like to work here and to be a part of this community. And it just so happens that we sell water bottles and tumblers to fund it, is the way that I think about it.
That's where we start with our coaching as guiding principles. All your culture, your mission, your vision, kind of like your North Star. So thank you for sharing that, because a lot of small business owners, especially those that have been in existence already, they don't want to go backwards. And to them, that feels like, what? That's corporate stuff. And it's like, no, it's not. For me, it's more important for small businesses than it is corporate, because in small businesses, you can actually implement that culture that you want. And you share a lot of stories. Your team shares a lot of stories of some of the culture things that you do. What are some of your favorite things that you do to instill that in your culture?
Absolutely. Well, I'd start with just saying this, that I think one of the reasons why people can respond negatively when you talk about mission or vision or values is that we are a little bit cynical, because we have seen people say one thing and do another. Yes. Especially in the large corporate environment. One of the examples is, if you had looked in the lobby of Enron, honesty and integrity were on their values sheet. Yes. Your culture isn't what you say it is. It's what people experience. And that's the key point. And it's the reason why sometimes we're cynical, because we'll come up with these great sounding mission statements and then they won't match what we experience actually doing the work day to day or being a part of a team. your culture is like the 60 or 90-day moving average of what people actually experience inside of your organization. And so as a leader of an organization that's really trying to focus on culture, what you are constantly asking is, number one, is everyone clear on what we're aiming at? And if they're not, then that's a failure of leadership. I think one of the things that makes it difficult to be strong in this area is, as a leader, you have to repeat yourself a lot.
Yeah.
100 times a week, you have to say the same ideas over and over again. And it really becomes the discipline of being able to stay on message. These are our 5 core values, and I'm constantly talking about them. I've heard people say that we need repetition, but not redundancy. And so I think that's also the idea is, first and foremost, as a leader, I am talking about these things constantly, but I'm also constantly pushing myself to find new analogies and new ways to express the concepts to our team, where I don't just get put on mute. It's like, okay, I've heard that Mike say this 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But if you have to say it the same way 1,000 times for them to hear it, you should. That it is healthy when your team knows, oh, this is the part where Mike talks again about how important excellence is to us.
Yeah.
Because that's the point where there really is clarity from everyone what you're aiming at. So a simple example of how we apply this, I'll give 2. One is when you get, well, actually, I'll give 3. If you apply for a job here, we lead with values. We lead with our mission, vision, values. And during the interview process, you're going to be exposed to those, and you're going to understand clearly that, hey, we're recruiting around these things. These things are at the top of our priority list. Once you get hired here, the very first day, usually, you will have a meeting with me where we spend an hour to an hour and a half going through those things.
Wow.
In a one-on-one setting, and talking about, here is what we want to be about and who we want to be. And I really try and reinforce with people, I'm not saying we do this perfectly. In fact, I'm explicitly saying that we don't do it perfectly because perfect people don't exist. So
Right.
the imperfect organizations don't exist. But this is truly what we're aiming at. And this is sincere. And we are going to authentically pursue these things. Another example that goes hand in hand with that, at about 90 days, I usually check in with employees. And the question that I will ask them is, how has your expectation after our mission, vision, values conversation compared to the reality? And it's one way that I get a litmus test for, are they experiencing on a day-to-day basis, are they experiencing consistency between who we say we want to be and who we actually are trying to be? And then we have Tuesday morning culture meetings where we will regularly bring these topics back in front of the company and talk at length about them. So, for example, next week, I think I'm speaking on collaboration on Tuesday morning for an hour to our entire team, where I'll talk for a while and then I'll take some questions. But again, there's clarity about what you're aiming at, and there's repetition, and that there's authenticity in that everyone in the organization really is aiming at those things. They're not just kind of smiling and nodding, but that they're really about those things. If you say, we are going to be about excellence, you have to, number one, you have to help people know that that's what you're about. You have to clearly define what that looks like. And you have to get people on board that really are driven by excellence and aren't just willing to say, yeah, excellence is good because I want a job. Another example of how we uniquely try to invest in our culture, and there are a bunch, is we really value relationships. We think that connectedness relationally, as I've talked about earlier, is a huge aspect of life. And a couple ways that we apply this. One is we bring in lunch every day that the team is in office. When the lunch gets here, everybody stops working. Everybody goes out to these big communal tables and has lunch together.
Wow.
And most of the discussion, the vast majority, is not about work. It's about, how was your weekend? How's the pregnancy going? Hey, what are you excited about for next month? And the personal stories and the dialogues that happen there are incredibly meaningful. And they create a real environment of trust and connectedness. Similarly, when I first meet employees, team members, one of the things I will say to them is, part of being excellent in this organization is being excellent relationally, and that is both inside and outside of work. As a job, most jobs don't care what your relationships outside of life, outside of work life look like. We explicitly care. We explicitly want to be the type of company where people can be excellent in their friendships and their family relationships outside of work. And if they're not able to maintain that balance, we want to help them to be able to do that, because it's an important part, we think, of living a life of excellence and a balance. So those are just a few examples, but the reality is it's trying to be thoughtful and deliberate with every part of how you do business and saying, hey, does this line up with who we say we're trying to be? And then as you see opportunities and examples where you can get better, or where you can infuse your values more clearly, that you're willing to pay the cost, whether that's time or money, to actually do so.
You're listening to Small Business Pivots, a podcast created for small business owners who feel like their business is stuck, for business owners who feel they are working hard and not getting anywhere. For more small business advice, visit our YouTube channel at Business Ownership Simplified. And don't forget to like, subscribe, or share this podcast. Let's get back to our guest. So do you feel it's possible to change a culture of a 30-plus-year-old business by using the same principles that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously easier to start with a clear definition, but most of us, that's not going to be the situation that we're placed in. We're placed in some kind of an existing culture. And the question is, how do we improve? You really have to have clarity of what you're aiming at. And to give an example here, it's not enough to just say, hey, we want to have a culture of excellence. You've got to have stories and examples and specifics that make it concrete for people. This is what we're aiming at. And one of the reasons why you have to have clarity is you have to be able to say, this is what it is and this is what it's not. You have to be able to draw that contrast and help people understand the trade-offs. Here's the reality. There's a lot of people that don't really care that much about being excellent, and that's fine. That's fine. But if your culture really values excellence, and then you have a bunch of people that don't really care about excellence, like you're just going to have that disconnect between who you say you are and what people actually experience. So I think it starts there. And I think you have to have the expectation that some people will churn out, and that is healthy. And that's probably best for everybody. That if you're trying to take the culture in a direction that is inconsistent with their core values, or that they're not going to be willing to make the choices that are necessary to be a part of that, then it's probably better for both parties. It's just going to be frustration for everyone if they continue to be a part of that culture. The second thing I would say is that the leader has to lead. That so much of culture is caught, not taught. It's people watching those that they look up to, that they respect, that are in positions of authority, and mimicking what they do. That we are, by definition, mimetic beings, where most of the phrases that we use, the way that we talk, the things that we do, they're actually things that we've picked up from someone else along the way that we respected or we looked up to. And maybe that's an actor or an older brother or a friend or whatever. But whatever the case is, if you want people to be able to put into practice a different way of doing business and different types of culture, you have to be willing to lead. No one is above the culture. This is one of the things that I'll tell people when we go through our culture document, that my hope is that we would have a culture strong enough that no one is above it, and that even if I was not willing to submit to the culture, that people would stop following me. Doesn't matter that I've been here first. Doesn't matter that I'm the biggest owner in the company. That you're not entitled to being able to play by your own rules. And so if you really want to start a different type of culture, if you want to make a change, it's going to have to start with the leader actually modeling that and living that out. And then people who are not willing to join on board saying, hey, let's find you the opportunity that does work for you. So it's a process, and I would say a lengthy process, but it's very accomplishable. There are a lot of examples that I have seen personally where it's been done. And I think it starts with being intentional instead of accidental about culture. And this is really, Michael, I think the thing that you're working with companies to achieve. And I'll make one more observation here. The reason why people start a business, it's not primarily about money. Actually, two reasons. One is there's a lot easier ways to make money than running a business. And number two, because what they're really after is not money, but what money can produce, or what they think that money can help them get towards, which is what everybody wants, which is quality of life. Everybody wants quality of life. And one of the reasons why culture is so powerful is if you own a business, your quality of life is dramatically impacted by the culture of your business. You want to know the single easiest way to improve your quality of life if you're a business owner? It's to have a healthy culture that you work in every day. It's to have people that you work with that you enjoy, that the people who report to you and that you manage, that it's a joy for you to do that. And so that's actually, you can double the profitability of your business and still be plenty unhappy. Yeah. But when you really improve the quality of the culture in your organization, it always will lead to higher quality of life, not just for you, but for the entire team. And in turn, not surprisingly, you get talented people that want to join you. It's easier to recruit, and people don't want to leave.
Right.
And all of those things make it so much easier to run a profitable business.
Amen. And for those small business owners, because I know there's a lot of them out there that continue to call us and say, why can't I find good employees? And I ask them in return, are you sure your company's ready for a good employee? Because they want to work for a good company. And most of them aren't, because they don't put in the time, the work. It sounds like you spend a lot of your time on culture. Is that what, percentage wise, how much time would you think that you spend on that?
Yeah, I think I absolutely, I mean, at this point, it is probably at least 50% of my efforts in some way tie back to culture. And you could say, how much is actual, like, non-culture, just strategy, blocking and tackling, or like making, key decisions. I mean, it's probably in the teens. And the reason is pretty straightforward. It's that the culture is a massive competitive advantage. Team is a massive competitive advantage. I said this on Twitter the other day, but it's worth repeating that, listen, I'm not afraid to admit that a lot of my success is due to the fact that I have just been able to attract and retain an extremely talented group of people. Yeah. That is in my, that's not putting my accomplishments down or minimizing them. I think it's more just emphasizing that that's what effective leaders do. Effective leaders are able to draw in more leaders, and they're able to get people that are as talented or even more talented than them, that want to come and be a part of what they're doing. And so if you're leading a business, like you said, saying, I just can't find quality people is a cop-out. Yep. There are quality people out there. It's just competitive to get them. And what you're really saying is, I can't compete. I can't be competitive with the best opportunity. So I can't get the best people. And so I don't love the market for the type of people that I can compete with. But I'll make this point one more time. Everybody's after quality of life. And so when it comes to really talented people, it's about more than, hey, can I pay them top of market? It is, what is the environment, the holistic environment, that holistic compensation package that I can offer them? Yeah, it's money and bonus, but it's also the training and the autonomy and the development that they're going to get as a person. It's the people that they're going to work with every day. It's the significance of the work they're going to be doing and how they feel about that. I mean, all these different things matter to people. And I think effectively recruiting starts with being able to very articulately communicate to a potential team member, hey, here is why this is absolutely the best situation for you, and why we can offer you the very best compensation package when it comes to quality of life. Because that's ultimately how people make employment decisions. Nobody ever said, I'm going to be less happy over here. I think I want to take that. They're always saying, well, what's going to make me the happiest? And for some people, that is as simple as just, where do I think I can make the most raw number of dollars? But most people, that is not the case. Most people, it's a combination of a bunch of different factors. And when you have a clear understanding of culture, I mean, think about it. We have 100 employees. There are 8 billion people in the world. The number of people that we need to recruit to work for us is very small. And what that allows us to do is have a very particular archetype. I mean, like, I don't have an illusion that everybody in the world would want to work at a place like Simple Modern, but fortunately, I don't need that to be the case. I need a very particular type of person to be exceptionally motivated to want to be a part of our team. And as long as I can do that, I can easily have more applicants than I have jobs available. And so again, this goes back to culture. Who is your archetype? Who is the avatar of who you're trying to hire? Do you have a really clear value proposition for them of why they'd want to be a part of your team? All that goes back to culture and having a strong sense of who you are.
I love this. It hits home with me because we preach this all day long. And for so many small business owners, we just keep looking for something simpler. And it's like, start with your people and get the right people and spend time defining who those people are, what they do, how you want the culture to be. It's so important. They say, what is it? Happy wife, happy life. And it's the same thing in a company. You know, if you've got happy people, things just go better. Things happen that you could never imagine. People bring ideas and they're empowered. And I think that's an overused word, that empowered, because a lot of people think, well, if I just tell that person what to do, they're going to do it. And it's like, no, they're not, because they don't
that's
feel.
That's not empowerment.
No, it's not. So what were a couple of pivots that you made early on? Because I know a lot of our listeners are kind of still in that early stage. And I say startup, but I have businesses that are 20 years old still operating like a startup. So what were kind of those first pivots that you got past to start building a culture like this?
Yeah, I really think, Michael, that we still pivot today. The size of the pivots changes as you get bigger. But if you think about it, it's like driving a ship. And as the ship gets bigger, it's not like a speedboat anymore. You know, at our size, we can't just like turn on a dime and change course dramatically. But you're also not just kind of setting course and just heading that direction for the next several years without touching the wheel. I think every day we pivot a little bit, because pivoting is really a result of learning and gaining information. So what I think we got good at really early on was running lots of little experiments to learn about the market and our customer and where we could be successful. We were entering a very competitive market. As you know, there's a ton of people that sell drinkware and insulated drinkware. And we were an upstart with a lot less money than all of our competitors. So we had to figure out, hey, where can we carve out some white space in our own niche? And figuring that out required a lot of little bitty experiments. So, I mean, one of the first ones that I already mentioned is we knew we wanted to be in e-commerce before we knew we wanted to be in drinkware, and we knew we wanted to sell on Amazon as our first channel, but we didn't even know what we wanted our first product to be. So we actually tried 3 products. Our third product was a water bottle. And so even, you could say that was a pivot. We didn't sell our first water bottle until we'd been selling on Amazon for 4 months. So even the willingness to test things and experiment at the most granular level, foundational level, like what are we going to sell? We did that. And once we found that the market responded to water bottles the way that it did, it became really clear, like, okay, we need to go full steam ahead in this direction. But there were a number of other pivots that have happened along the way, whether that was strategy with our channels. Hey, we think we're going to approach our business with Target in this way. And then, you get a couple quarters of data and realize that's not the right approach here. We need to change course. Or our strategy when it comes to how we invested in inventory and new products. So instead of, I think, isolating 1 or 2 specific pivots, I think I would just kind of highlight that pivoting is a natural and healthy part of the process. That what you hope is you get further into product market fit, your pivots become more like 1, 2, 3 degree pivots each day, as opposed to 70-degree pivots.
Yeah.
Whereas early on, they can be really like massive, changes of direction. And that what drives those pivots is what you're learning through experiments. So what you're really trying to do in the early stages, I think, of finding product market fit is you're trying to understand the market. You're just trying to learn, because if you understand the market, you will inevitably see ways that you can add value and that people will pay you for. But that comes from understanding, and that comes from asking questions and then figuring out how inexpensively can I can I test or experiment to find out that answer? So one just exercise that anyone listening to this can do that can be helpful is taking out a piece of paper and asking, what are the questions that you don't know about your customer or your business? And it's a muscle that you have to build. But what are the things that you don't know? And similarly, what are the assumptions you have about your business that you run your business off of, but you're not actually sure are true? And I try to go through that exercise fairly regularly, because when I do, inevitably, I realize, okay, I don't know X, or I think I know X, but I don't really know if I know X. And then I'm able to run an experiment, and then I learn from that experiment. And almost always, once I've learned from it, I realize I think I want to take a little bit of a different approach now because I see more clearly. So ironically, we can talk about business like businesses, this series of dramatic insights and secret perspectives, but it's not really. The answers become pretty straightforward when you have the right information.
Yeah.
You don't need to have some 170 IQ to understand how to interpret the results or the information usually once you have it. It's usually more about understanding what information you don't have and what insight you don't have in order to make the right decision, and becoming skilled at finding ways to get that information inexpensively. That's really the trick. And it's the reason why I'm a big believer that entrepreneurship is a lot more about mindset than it is about raw IQ, because like I said, the actual decisions become relatively straightforward once you have the right information. Probably the other point that I would make here, I made this in a meeting this week, but I think it's worth sharing. In the same way, a lot of times it'll be obvious the next 3 or 4 things you should do. It's just not obvious what order they should happen in. Yeah. And that's another example of where the more you know, the more you're able to sequence things and understand, okay, these are my 4 priorities, but this is the order I should go after them in.
Well, you have been so valuable today. Lots of good information, culture. I'm all about people. So you're not only talking about the people within your walls, within your organization, you're talking about the people outside of your organization. And a lot of times business can be so much simpler if we just ask questions, like you said. So I love that. It's you've simplified it for a lot of people today. So I know I follow you. We engage on LinkedIn. You're very active there. Any other places that people can follow you, just to, because I know about every day you share some nuggets just like you have today?
Yeah, I try to. I would say Twitter and LinkedIn are usually the best places to follow me. And I talk about the kind of things we discussed on this podcast. I try and share the insights I'm having from trying to lead and run a business that's gotten to scale.
Yeah, I highly encourage all of our listeners to go follow you, connect with you, because you are inspirational and you lead by example, and that's very appreciated. So I know for a lot of small business, I'm going to wrap up here, but for a lot of small businesses, we can't think big. So where does Simple Modern look like, and what do they look like in 5-10 years? Have you looked that far?
You know, I think that what has been helpful for me is that I now focus a lot less on magnitude, and I focus more on, at a fundamental level, are the right things happening, and is our leadership base being multiplied? Because I know that inevitably, if those things are happening, it's going to lead to growth and scale. And so I think that that's, as a leader, the most important thing. Understanding what are the things that show your business is healthy and that it is set up to flourish and to grow, and be fixated on those things with the trust that those things will eventually translate into the kind of performance and growth that you want. So I don't think I ever anticipated us being at the scale that we're at, and it's more conceivable than ever that we could get to very, very large scale. But to me, the way that I need to focus my time is I need to focus on, am I growing the number of empowered leaders and that have good judgment and can make decisions? Because if so, I don't have to have all the answers about how we're going to grow in 3 years, because I have a lot of really capable and strong leaders that are going to be working on those questions. And obviously I'm going to be doing it with them. But it de-emphasizes the business being built on my brilliance, and it emphasizes it being built on the strength of our team and culture, which I think is healthy for everyone.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much again for your time and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with all of our listeners today. And I wish you continued success with Simple Modern, and we'll see you over on LinkedIn.
All right. Thanks, Michael.
Welcome to the Recap and Coach's Corner. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Mike is truly a gifted leader, entrepreneur, CEO of one of the finest drinkware companies in the world. His company is based in the same state that I am, Oklahoma. He's not too far from us, and I know people that have worked there. I know him personally. We've had conversations before. I know some of the organizations that he's involved in. He walks the walk. So I encourage you to re-listen to the show. If you have cancerous issues in your culture, listen to the show again. The things that he talks about, those are basic fundamental principles that every business should have, because as we're recapping the show, as you heard him say, you kind of get out what you put in. In other words, he spends more than half of his time as the CEO implementing, instilling the culture and the desire that they want to have within their company. So make sure that you are going slow to go fast. So put some time into your business to improve that culture. As far as the Coach's Corner, what we do is I try to give some free actionable advice that you can take away from the show based on some of the things that we talked about. And one of the things that Mike talked about, which I talked about as well, is defining your guiding principles. Part of those guiding principles are your purpose statement, your mission, your vision, your culture, things like that. I talk to so many business owners, as I mentioned in the show, that always say, I can't find good help, or why can't people just come to work? And I'll give you the answer that I believe to be true, that I have found to be true after interviewing people that haven't gotten back into the workforce. COVID is still a prime culprit of this principle of people not wanting to go back to work, or when they go back to work, they expect something different. What COVID did to a lot of people, whether we like it or not, this is one thing I tell small business owners, because they start rolling their eyes. Why can't people just come back to work, do their job? Because that's not the way the times are anymore. COVID proved this differently. So what happened when everybody was forced to stay at home, people figured out how to live on less or how to live on nothing at all. Whether we like that or not, it doesn't matter. We have to accept the fact that people figured out how to work on less. People also figured out that they were stuck at a job that they hated. And it wasn't the job, it was the company. Most people never said, when I asked them, can you define why you hate your job? And they would mostly respond with, it wasn't the job, it was the manager, or it was the owner, or it was the company. And so people are waiting out to find a good company. Mike made reference to that by saying it's very competitive to find those good people, great people, but they are out there and they are eager to find a company that wants their services in their company. So for Coach's Corner, here's your actionable advice. We actually have a core value assessment sheet that we can help you define that. I'm offering that free of charge to get you started. Second thing is, we also have a purpose statement guiding sheet. We also have a mission and a vision guiding sheet. I'm willing to give those to you for free. The only thing you have to do is email me at michael@michaeldmorrison.com. You can also go to our website, michaeldmorrison.com, and in the right-hand corner at the top of the page, click on the Let's Chat button, and we can have a 30-minute free consultation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or engage with our podcast.